Hi, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our hance and Draycir webinar on Spindle. My name is Matt Peace. I'm the account director here at hance, and I'm going to act as the moderator for today's presentation. Pleased to say I'm joined by Zoë Young from Draycir, who's our partner account manager. And works with us as well as a lot of our mutual customers already using Spindle. So the aim of today's session, whether you're an existing Spindle user or looking at Spindle, is a hints and tips session. So we'll try and make the session appeal to different types of users. But just in terms of a few housekeeping items, I just want to go through a couple of the key points. So we're expecting today's webinar to last around the 45-minute mark, give or take, and we will be recording the session. So we'll make this available to anyone on here to view on demand. All the participants will be set to listen only. That's just to avoid any background noise. So that will stay for the duration of the webinar. But if you do have any questions, there is a question button on the right-hand side of the screen. As that pane opens, just type your question and then click ask. What we'll do is we'll see any questions pop through as the session goes through. If it's a suitable time for us to stop, I can jump in and ask Zoe as we go, or we may even take the questions offline and come back to you individually. So feel free to put them through to us and we'll make sure we get back to you either at the time or afterwards. So with all that done, I'll now hand you over to Zoe at Draycir to kick us off with the presentation.
Right, okay, thank you very much for that introduction, Matt, and welcome everybody, and thank you for being so prompt joining the webinar this morning. So as Matt said, we're going to use this as more of a sort of a hints and tips sessions for Spindle. So for those of you that are already using Spindle, you'll probably learn some great tips that you didn't know Spindle could actually do. Or you may be a new user to Spindle or even thinking about Spindle, so I'll be able to help in all of those areas. Now, any of the hints and tips that I'll give you today, if you're wanting to apply these to your software, if you already have it, then it's actually hance that will do all of that work for you. So hance are actually accredited to not only install, configure the software, but also to support it as well. So without further ado, I'm just going to change my screen and just explain to you the differences of Spindle. So for those of you that already have Spindle, you may have Spindle Professional or you may have Spindle Document Distribution. If you're to buy Spindle today, then it's only Spindle Document Distribution that you'll be buying, and that's simply because that is the new version. The very simple difference between these is that Spindle Document Distribution is now the new name and the new version. Spindle Professional, and this is really important that you check whether you do have Spindle Professional, the older one, because actually we're end of lifing Spindle Professional. It's 18 years old next month. It's the first time Draycir's ever end of lifed any product. So versions 2009 or 2012, that already has end of life. So the 1st of September last year, if you're on version 6, that is due to expire the 1st of April. Now, if you already have Spindle and you're paying for your annual support, then you don't need to worry because you can actually upgrade to the new version. There's no license cost for it. That's what you pay your annual support for. And it will just be the cost of a consultant at hance in order to do that work. So don't worry. If you are thinking, oh gosh, we're already out of support, again, don't worry. Your software is not going to stop working. All that means is if you do have a support call, it may be the only way to fix that problem. If it is a problem, is that you need to upgrade it. The main thing is that you're now aware of that situation. And also, if you see the name Spindle Professional, Spindle Document Distribution, what's the difference? The only difference is it's had a rebrand, and there are some new features in there as well. So some of the things I'll show you today are actually available within Spindle Professional. There are certain things that you would have to go to the new version for to do. The majority, though, everybody should be able to do no matter what version you're on. But of course, if you're thinking about changing your configuration, that's a great time then to obviously upgrade the product at the same time. So I'm going to use this as a kind of did you know session. So it's going to be a did you know session for those people that already have Spindle. And of course, for those people who are thinking about Spindle, then it's almost like, did you know this software can do it? So the first thing we're going to talk about is enhancing corporate identity. Now, marketing departments across, it doesn't matter what sector that your industry is in, we spend thousands and thousands of pounds on corporate branding. Now, when we are working within an accounts environment, when we're sending documents out from accounting software, generally the email we're sending out is just plain text. And it doesn't include that corporate identity that your company has spent thousands and thousands of pounds on. So actually one of the key elements to Spindle and why a lot of people have it, it means you can change this email content. Now, even though you may already be using Spindle, you may think to yourself, well, when I'm sending out the sales invoices, it is still plain text and I'm using Spindle. And that really could be the case. And it just depends how it's been set up. But that can be changed. And it can be changed so you're actually using a HTML email. So the body of the email now is going to look like the same as everyone else within the business. You can add color to it. So this is then your corporate branding coming together. You can add the logos to it. You can bring through fields from GP as well. So when we're talking about logos, we can, and we'll come on to this later on as well, you can actually have different customers seeing different things as well. When we're talking about bringing through fields from GP, there may be certain things you want to bring through on the body of that email, and I'll show you some examples of that. But also the physical document as well. The physical document itself can have multiple overlays. And you're probably wondering what overlays are, and I'll be showing you in just a moment, and obviously adding your logos on as well. So before I show you an example of, the email content and what the body of the email potentially can look like, I'm going to show you what these overlays do. So in the top left-hand corner, what we're seeing is a statement report from GP. And you'll notice there's no branding on it at all. Down at the bottom, I have 3 different lots of branding, and I've got 2 separate, and these are just Word documents, or they can be PDFs. So what this means is the documents at the bottom are held within Spindle. And obviously the report is the report we're using from GP. So if you are a Spindle user, you might not even know this is what happens in the background, because to actually use Spindle, all I ever do is press print, select Spindle Pro Auto, and it sends out whatever it is I'm wanting it to send out, from statements to invoices to pro formas to remittances to purchase orders, whatever it is. So if I am a business that has 3 different branding, and in my example I'm going to be using today, I'm using these colored peppers. So I've got red pepper, green pepper, and yellow pepper. In other words, I've got 3 different logos for my one business. So instead of using 3 separate report layouts in GP, I can actually just have one and then use a field within GP so Spindle knows when the analysis equals this, use the red pepper. When it equals this, have the green. When it's this, use the yellow. So now I only need one statement. So this is great, because if I need to make any amendments to a statement for whatever reason, I only ever need to change one report, not the 3, the 2, the 6, however many different brandings you have. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, we don't have 3 brandings, we only have 1. That again is fine. If you set up Spindle in this way, it does actually mean that if your business is thinking of changing their branding, we all know going into the GP report writer, if that's where you've got the logos, and make the changes within there, that's a huge job. Much easier to change a PDF, just swap it out with another one and it's done. It's really, really quick and easy. So that's kind of the principle behind Spindle. I don't need to just add one overlay. So you can see here, I've got a second overlay here, just with the word overdue. So this would mean I can add some criteria. That criteria is going to be something as simple as, if any of the invoices on this statement are overdue, put that overdue stamp on. If they're not, I don't want to. It might be the case that if you're sending out an invoice and you're sending them a copy, then that's where there says copy on it. It could be that it goes to a salesperson, it's going to say salesperson. These are just all ideas that you could incorporate. This one just here is literally a highlighter. Because it's a statement, I want to highlight the value I want them to pay. So there's lots of different ideas that you can do. When I send it to Spindle, this is what happens in the background. It collates the information together and produces the PDF. If it's a PDF because you're sending it out by email, or it's going to send it to your printer if it's going to be printed. And believe it or not, yes, it still does fax as well. I get it very rarely. I just mention it just in case. So that's the PDF that has been produced. Exactly the same for invoices as well. So let's just take a very quick look at some examples that I've already done. So let's have a look at an example of a statement, seeing so that what we've just been having a look at. So the first thing we want to have a look at is the content of the email. So remember, the body of the email. So whatever you're using Spindle out for at the moment, if you're currently a Spindle user, what does it look like? If you're not using Spindle, again, what does the body of the email look like that you're sending out? If it's just plain text and it's the same for everyone, that can be completely changed just by configuring Spindle. So you can see here, so remember, I've got 3 different brandings. I've got a red pepper, a green and a yellow. So not only will it change it on the report, it can also change it in the body of the email as well. And what I've done, I've actually brought through some fields from GP, the account name, the account number, even the aging buckets. This is a fantastic idea because if I was one of your customers and I'm receiving this statement, without even looking at the statement, I can see how overdue it is. So I don't need to be clicking into here to know that this is overdue. We can see it's overdue because it's got that overdue stamp on it that I spoke about earlier. So that's an idea of, what the content of the email can potentially look like. So here's an invoice as well. So I can see that this time it's got the yellow peppers. If I look in the actual invoice itself, you'll see it's the same. It's got the yellow peppers on it as well. So they're ideas of something very simple that you can do, and that's just looking at the actual body of the email. So it doesn't matter what version of Spindle you're on, you'll be able to do that. What about adding extra attachments? So you might have already spotted this in the example I just showed you. So how many times do you do a statement run and then all of a sudden you get bombarded with email and telephone requests for copies of the invoices? So to actually cut that out altogether, when we send out the statement run, let's configure Spindle to automatically attach the corresponding invoices for that particular statement. This time, there is no question that they have the information they need in order to make payment. If you're thinking to yourself, that's great, but I have particular customers that may potentially mean 60 invoices for certain customers, then obviously it's not going to work. It's not going to work because there's no email that's going to be able to handle sending that many attachments. So what you can do, if you want to do this for all the other customers, but not this group of customers because they have too many invoices, again, Spindle can handle different customers in different ways. So it may be the case that 90% of my customers are going to receive a statement with their copy invoices in, but actually this 10%, because the volume of invoices they have, they're going to just have a statement without the copy invoices. And again, Spindle can handle doing different things within the same statement run. So I don't need to split it out saying this 90% needs statements and invoices, this one just needs statements. I can do the whole statement run, and as a user I don't need to know what that configuration is in the background. Spindle will just do it for me. So there's other ideas where you can add extra attachments. So if maybe there's a promotion, you want to put a promotional flyer against a certain document. It might be that you want to send it out with all invoices, or it could be another type of report. It might be you've got a new price list that you want people to see. You might want to just put that against all statements or any other report. So it's entirely up to you how you want to send things out and what the example will be. So there's my example of my statement, and it has the corresponding invoices with it already. The really important thing with anything I'm telling you about today, the actual user that's using Spindle, so if that's yourself or is it one of your colleagues, you do not need to be retrained on how to use Spindle. You use it in exactly the same way. It's just the configuration in the background that has changed, which will allow these things to happen. So another idea which may be of interest to some of you as well. So, different ideas to attach different things. If you're sending out purchase orders, for example, it might be I'm using my purchase order that's come from GP, but actually I've got some delivery instructions that I automatically want to add. So every time I send out a purchase order, it's going to automatically pick up this particular document. So this document's going to tell them where to deliver it, the access times for the business, and if there's any site around the site, if there's any road closures or anything like that. It's quite a nice idea, especially when you think of things like bank holidays. We've just had the Christmas season, things like that. That can come in really, really handy. So that's looking at attaching documents of either documents that have previously been sent out using Spindle, or this, of course, is just a simple Word, PDF, or another type of document that I'm automatically picking up each time. So this example could have been an invoice with a new price list, a statement with a new price list. Can you double these up together? So can on the actual statement, can I put a statement, copy invoices, and a price list? Yes, you can. It's entirely up to you how you want to do that. Okay, so I've sort of touched on this a little bit already. So having a look at different templates for different customers, even within the same batch. And remember, this is any of the reports that you're sending out from Spindle. It doesn't matter what the report is. So some ideas for this is different branding to different customers. So we've looked at that with my different colored peppers. And remember, not only for the document, but also in the body of the email as well. Different languages. So is it the case that you're dealing with international customers? If you are, wouldn't it be a nice idea that when you're sending out on the same invoice run, that this particular customer here who's in the UK gets one wording and then the other one is in a different language? And this is something else that you can set up in Spindle as well. So the other thing is I've got different messages. So these two invoices were on the same invoice run, and you can see here, this is one of my construction customers. So I've just put that we've got some new construction products available. Ask your account manager for more information. On the same invoice run, I had a different type of customer. I've got change of logo there, and it's just to say that they've lowered their prices for 2020. That was not the case for those construction customers. So now I'm actually within the same invoice run, I'm doing everything the same, but the configuration changes it for the type of customer. So even if you've got the same branding, but you've got different types of customers, again, we can change this messaging within here as well. So whether it's the same branding, whether it's different branding, the wording itself. So whether that's a language difference, a common one is when you've got online customers and retail customers, and maybe they've got different terms and conditions and things like that as well. That's another aspect of Spindle that you can do as well. Okay, remember, if anyone has got any questions, Matt will be receiving those. If you just use your questions tab, if you've got any questions as I'm going through the hints and tips that I've got for you today. So another idea for you. So you can actually improve your internal communications. So have you got a sales team? So the way this could work, and there's lots of different examples here, I'll just give you a few of them. And this is something we do internally at Draycir actually. So you can automatically send the salesperson an email when an order is processed probably, or even if there's an outstanding statement sent out to a customer and it relates to an account manager's account, they can actually also get notification of that. So what this means is, in these two examples, is if I'm the salesperson, I don't need to chase the accounts department to process an order. I know because I get an email. But equally, I also know when one of my accounts is potentially becoming a bad debt because I will automatically get a copy of that overdue statement. And again, this is just part of the configuration. So we've got an example here where the invoice has gone out to the customer. Automatically, this is what the internal salesperson has received. Remember, Spindle, the way you use it, exactly the same. This again is just configuration. So we've got a completely different body of the email because it's internal. I don't really need to make it look too fancy as such. If I just double click into the PDF itself, what I'm able to see, I've got a different overlay on here, which is the salesperson's overlay, but they've got all the information that they need. If you're archiving those invoices maybe to SharePoint, you could also put a link to SharePoint, or if it's just somewhere on your network, which again is something else that Spindle can do, and that can be a hyperlink to take them straight through to it. So that's an example of when an invoice has gone out, the salesperson can be automatically copied in. When we're talking about sort of sales invoices, it may be that you have a sales director, and maybe if they're away on holiday, annual leave, or they're expecting a large order to come in, let's do some configuration on this to say only invoices over a certain value needs to be, an email needs to go to this person or these people. You can also do that. When it comes to the actual statement, when the statement is actually overdue, let's send it to the salesperson. So now they can clearly see the account they look after, which in my case here is a company called Abbey Retail. They're overdue, and they've got the overdue statement with all of the corresponding invoices. So now if I'm a salesperson, I'm going to know the accounts department aren't going to be happy with any new orders coming from this account, and that's automatically been sent to me.
Zoe, it's Matt here. Sorry, just
Yeah.
a question. It seems like we have a bit of a pause, so I thought I'd ask. We have a question come in that says, when we mention we can change the configuration, is that as a user, or is that something that would need to be done either by, I guess, by Draycir or by Hance?
Sure. So depending on what the configuration is, depending on what your knowledge of Spindle is, it would generally always go to hance. It would be a consultant at hance that would actually do that configuration for you. If you're familiar with Spindle Document Distribution tools, and obviously it's going to depend on what the example would be, but just to give you a very quick example of where things like the body of the email is. So if I go to my sales invoices here, and each one of these, some of you may not have even seen this before, but this is kind of the underbonnet of Spindle. These are all of the automations that I've got configured for my setup. And here are my sales invoices. So each one of these has its own automation. So I actually have configured for my construction customers, retail customers, every other type of customer, and also my salesperson as well. They all have their own configurations. So if there's no email, for example, it will print it out. Where do I want to print it to? Here it is. For my email, what do I want the body of the email to look like, and all the automations behind here as well. So if the question was, can I change the content of the email? You can quite easily come into here if you want to. If you don't know HTML very well, because it's the HTML script that will give this to you, This might be where you want some help on that, and then you can just copy this one if you have it done for invoices, for example, and then you want to copy it for any other automations, then you can do. Just depending how good you are with HTML, some people are better than others, of course. But so these sorts of things, this is where you can do it. Sometimes the way in which Hance will help you is they'll do one and then you can set it up for everything else. So there are some things that you can do very easily. The file attachment. So if I also wanted to add in here maybe a particular PDF document for every time. So if I go into here, I might find a document or a price list or something like that. There we go. I can add it as easy as that. If it's configuration that I want all of my invoices copied into the statement, this is where we wouldn't do it in this area here. We would actually do it within the GP report writer. You would see the Spindle commands. That's where you would need the help of Hance to do it. So depending on what it is you want to do will depend if it's something straightforward like adding a file. You've just seen how you can do that. Other things may be more complicated, so it might be Hance can show you how to do one and then you can replicate it, or they can do the whole thing for you. So hopefully that's answered that question. You'll
It's
notice
Matt again. Yeah, I think
yeah.
at the risk of answering my own question as well, I think it is more an implementation question as well. So from an Enhance perspective, certainly our approach is to try and equip users with as much knowledge as possible to be self-sufficient. So if that's certainly the driver to be able to do these things as an end user, then certainly wouldn't look to put enough training time in any work to make sure that people can do the sort of changes that are pretty common.
Yeah, perfect. Just a little tip as well, whilst we're talking about configuration, in Spindle Document Distribution tools, and it's always the case, isn't it? Someone will teach you how to do something because you're not doing it every day. You know, you can easily forget. But what you'll notice, these help screens, anywhere I'm clicked into Spindle, any screen at all, you'll see there's a help screen. For any tab I click on, you have a help screen. So, you know, don't be worried if, you know, you forget certain things after you've been trained. You always have training, you know, helps and tips at the bottom there as well. Okay. So I said a lot of these things that you'd be able to do whichever version that you have. This is one of the features where you would normally need to be upgraded to the latest version to get it. And there is one thing we all want, and that's to get paid quicker, of course. One way of doing this is actually to add a pay now button onto these PDF documents when you're emailing them out. We actually work with two different merchants, so SagePay or WorldPay. And you can actually add them to a pro forma invoice, which works really well, because if you're sending a pro forma invoice, you generally want the money straight away before it can actually be processed. So that's one idea for you. You can also put it on a sales invoice, and you can also put it on a statement as well. So it might be you've thought about taking card payments in the past, but what's best practice to do it? It might be you already have card payments. If you already take card payments, then how are you taking them at the moment? So there's a few different scenarios. Sometimes you have to generate a link every single time, which obviously is time consuming, so you don't need to do that this way. Sometimes it might be the case that the customer needs to call into you in order to give them their card number. But of course, data protection now stops us repeating back the number over the phone, and we're getting a lot of people having the pay now put on these documents because actually it just takes away all of that over the phone, taking their card details and things like that. So it's almost, I want to wipe my hands off credit card payments, or I still want my customer to do it, but I don't want the responsibility of someone speaking over the phone to me. So this is exactly the perfect way of overcoming that. So just to show you how it works. So basically, I will send out my pro forma, my invoice, exactly how I'm doing now. Within the configuration of the report writer, we will put the pay now button. When your customer receives the invoice, you will see there's a pay now button here. You can put it anywhere on the document. As soon as they click into the Pay Now button, that takes them straight through to either a Sage Pay or a World Pay. The only difference here is it will say World Pay instead of Sage Pay, and it's slightly different screen. It takes them straight to them. So at this point here, it's away from us being Draycir. It's away from yourselves. It's going straight through to a secure portal. The customer will simply, in both examples, click how they want to pay and fill in their details. That's it. As soon as they've clicked in all of their card details, the payment's gone through, the customer will receive an email to say the transaction has gone through, as you would expect, but also you receive an email as well. So sometimes when you're dealing with these merchants, you don't actually get that notification. You have to go into a portal to see it. Obviously, you still get a portal, but you also get an email, which is great because it has all the information of the invoice that's actually been paid. So that's how that works. So it's really swift. You've also got you can put a Pay Now link within the body of the email as well. So if I know that I always receive the Pay Now button on the invoices, I just know to go to the email and click on the hyperlink within here. Okay. So what other things have I got to tell you about? So there are lots of other features as well. So you can actually decide which email address the reports are sent from. And it can be a combination. So you saw my whole list of all the different ones that I have. And it might be you want different ones coming from different email accounts. So my example there is invoices and statements are going to come from accounts at company.com, for example, but my purchase orders and remittances are coming from an individual. So you can set up the difference. And of course, going straight from GP, you don't have the flexibility to do that at all. So I know many instances where people want to send out from different email addresses, but it's the same person always doing it, and they have Spindle just for that one functionality. So other things you may not know about, or you may have certain customers. So at the moment, I do know McCain's, who does the chips. They are the biggest culprit of this at the moment, that they will not pay an invoice unless the email subject line and the PDF name of the invoice has a certain reference which has come from them. So I have had 2 instances in the last 6 months of people having Spindle just for that. And of course, straight from your accounting software, you can't do that. So you will notice within my examples here, you know, I have different subject lines. So I could use the criteria when it's overdue, put in this overdue word. When it's not overdue, it doesn't say that. So I can change not only the subject line here, but also what is written on the PDF itself as well. And again, if you've got different customers, if you've got international customers, different languages, let's put the word for French instead of invoice. Let's have the French word for it. So there are different ideas that you can do there as well. I'll just go back to my PowerPoint. So if you're using other software, not just GP, so it might be that you're actually billing from a different software and the invoices coming from that software, not coming from GP. Spindle Document Distribution is the one piece of software that we develop that can be used outside of the accounting software. So actually, I can use this just in Word, Excel, or most other third-party software as well. How do I know if I can use it in other software? Can I access the report writer in order to put the Spindle commands on? If the answer is yes, then yep, you can use it. So if you are using other billing software or something, because you've got a Spindle license, potentially you can use it with that as well. And that's usually something that Hance can also help you with as well. Archiving of documents. So automatically, Spindle can archive anything that you're sending out. So whether that's your sales invoices, statements, remittances, purchase orders, etc., credit notes, it can automatically archive it in the file format you want it to. So it may be the case that I've got an archive on SharePoint or just on the network that says accounts. Within there, I've got a split folder saying sales and purchase. Within there, I've then either got subfolders saying invoices, statements, credit notes, etc., or it will automatically put in the customer business name, the company name, and then within there you can have you can structure it however you want to. The great thing is, if you're archiving these documents, particularly invoices, if you're wanting to bring those through with your statements, you would need to archive them first and foremost for that to happen. But sometimes it's quicker and easier to look at that archive location when someone wants to query it, rather than going into GP and then reprinting that particular document. That's why a lot of people will do it. It automatically does those. So all it is again within the configuration, I will configure what I want that file format to look like. And then as soon as I press print, Spindle Pro Auto OK, it's then going to create those files for me if they're not there. So my example of Abbey Retail, if I've got a subfolder with accounts, invoices, it will look, okay, I don't have a file format called Abbey Retail. Let's create that folder and put the invoices in it. If the folder was already there, it will just put the invoice in there. So my other question, this is going to be a question for people that have already got Spindle. Is everything going into your drafts? Now, more often than not, people will say, yes, it is. And that doesn't have to be the case. So what you've seen in my example here is that, yes, I do have things going into my drafts, but it's a demonstration and I want them to go in there. But that's not really how Spindle should be working. It only goes into drafts if you've asked it to. So if in the configuration it's ticked to say to put them in the drafts, and that's why they go in there. Really, Spindle is all about getting things sent out quickly. So if there is no reason for you to put, let's say it's your invoice run, everything goes into your drafts. And we all know, if you're using Outlook, for example, there's no way of me saying, right, I've highlighted them all, press send. It doesn't work. I have to go in individually. So actually, if there's no reason for them to go into drafts, let's deselect a box and I'll show you where it is. And they will then actually just go straight to your sent items. Now, sometimes when I speak to people, they'll say, yes, it goes in the drafts because I have a certain customer that I just need to check before it goes out. Okay, well, let's do that 90-10% split again. If it's 90% of the customers that you're happy for the invoices just to go straight out, or statements just to go straight out, then let's configure that that happens. But then that 10%, let's only let the 10% go into our drafts. And that will make someone's life a hell of a lot easier. So again, let's just go into this Spindle Document Distribution Tools, or it'll be called Spindle Professional Tools for those on the older version. And what you will see is in email settings, if you go to Advanced, can you see here it says place emails on hold? Because that is selected, it's going to go into my drafts. If I deselect it, they're now just going to go straight out to my sent items. So that's how easy it is. So if you don't want them to go into your drafts, then just deselect that. If you do want to go into drafts there, if you want to split people, then this is where you may need hance just to help you with that configuration. But once it's done, and it's going to save someone a lot of time. You'll also notice, you can probably see here, this is where I can actually change the attachment name in here and also override the subject line in here as well. So this is exactly where all of that you're able to capture. Okay, so I think I've covered all of the hints and tips that I have to tell you today. I don't know, Matt, have we got any questions that have come through at all since I've been speaking there? Any that we want to cover off at the moment?
Just doing a check. I think no, we covered the one that came through.
Marvelous. Okay, so I've probably bombarded everyone with enough hints and tips to surprise you on how much Spindle actually does. And it's always the way, isn't it? It's not until somebody will tells you all of the different aspects of what a product does that you actually know the full potential behind it. So we've had a look at Spindle Document Distribution, or Spindle Professional as the old version is called today. I'm actually doing another webinar on Thursday, which is for Credit Hound. So if any of you are interested in automating your credit control process, if you are a business, and I know there are some people on the call that have already got Credit Hound, But you know, if Credit Hound is something new you've not heard of before, if you are the sort of company that does your credit control starting from an age debt report, I would say get yourself on the webinar on Thursday and you'll be able to learn more about it. You'll be amazed how much time Credit Hound can actually save you. So if you want to book your place, I'm sure if you just on the questions tab, if you just do a message to Matt, he'll be able to send you the registration link to get yourself registered. But it's actually on this Thursday at 2 o'clock. If you're not able to attend but you are interested, again, if you just use the questions tab and ask Matt, then we'll be able to organise a one-to-one session if that time isn't convenient for you.
And
But
Zoe, sorry,
yeah, sure.
I was wrong. There's two questions that have just come through.
Oh,
Actually,
are
if
they?
we,
Okay,
if you don't,
perfect.
if you don't mind just doing these.
Yeah.
The first one is there a limit to the amount of email and invoices that can go at once?
No, there's no limit to it. The limit's always going to be what your internal systems can handle. But you know, going back 18 years ago when Spindle came about, it was a lot less than what they can do now. But it's what Outlook can handle. That's really the answer to that question,
Sure.
and you know what your internal systems are. But no, there's no limit to it at all. No.
Okay. And the other one was when archiving, can a document be archived by reference number and customer code?
Yeah, so long as those fields are within GP. So I always answer these questions long-winded. Please forgive me, it's because I talk a lot. Just to answer the question, just so you just give you a little bit of insight to how Spindle works as well. I'm just going to go back to that email setting because we can see some commands here. So Spindle has hash commands. These are the commands that are within the report, which basically links up the report from GP to Spindle so it knows how to send things out. And also, a bit like mail merge, what it needs to replace #var2 #with. So within the report, what I do is say this field here, so let's go on the particular reference that that the question's referring to. Within the report, I can say, okay, #var4 equals this reference field in GP. Therefore, I can now use that # command as something else. So if I wanted it in the body of the text here, I can now say #var4 is that reference field. So anytime it sees it, it reaches out to GP and replaces, obviously in this case, var2 with the invoice number. So if I just go to this advanced setting here, that's where you can see it then come together. So whether it's in the attachment name or whether it's here, so long as I've configured in the report to say, and there's about, we've got #var 1 to 48, I think it is, but then there's #var db 1 to about 50, I think. So there's lots of different fields you can use. There's more obvious ones as well, like #name and things like that. So yes, the answer is you could actually say for this particular, which is my McCain's example, that's how they wanted to do it. It had to have certain fields, and I can have more than one as well. So absolutely, and this is where you'll do it. If you don't want every customer to see it, that's fine. You can just have one automation for one customer or several customers. Okay, so hopefully that's
Great,
answered
thank you.
that question just there. Was there another one there, Matt?
No, that
Or was
takes
that,
us
no, that was
to
the two because the other one
that
was
was the
it.
two.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think we've done
perfect.
them now. So
Okay,
worth me
brilliant.
mentioning, if anyone does have any other questions, contact us afterwards as well. Feel free to send us an email or speak to your account manager at Hance, and obviously we'll do our best to get those answers
Yeah.
for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And rarely I've got 2 minutes spare. So if anyone does have any questions, now's your time to ask.
No, I think that's everything. So I guess just to wrap up, firstly, Zoe, thank you very much for today's webinar. That's been really
No
useful,
problem.
really just highlighting some of the real power behind Spindle. So I hope everybody's found at least something there that they didn't know before. That's what these things are all about. So we'll keep doing these sorts of webinars during this year regularly. Any feedback is welcome. So once the webinar window is closed, you'll get a survey that will pop up, and we would really appreciate it if you could take a few minutes just to give us some feedback on today's session. Over the next couple of days, we'll be sharing the recording of the webinar. So that will be appearing in your inbox very shortly, so you can watch it again or forward it over to any of your colleagues. So once again, thanks again for joining us. Have a lovely day. And Zoe, thanks again for the presentation. That was great.
No, thanks for inviting me. Thanks everyone for attending. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.